stragglers here.
We're not.
Yeah, usually
Well, you know
the
that's
worst
not
thing in the
what
world
it
is
is.
like the room full of guitar players all noodling while you're trying to talk.
Right.
You know? But on the other hand, I kind of want to let us noodle a little bit because I don't want to like do talky without, you know, a little hands on. So.
You heard of John Knowles before? I never heard. I was a classical guitarist in school. I heard of John Knowles' name. My teacher told me that you should try some John Knowles because it's kind of classical guitar without being so classical.
Yeah.
And then years later, I kind of ran into Chet Atkins, and as a classical guitarist, I first heard Chet, and I was like, oh no. And then a couple years later, I went back to it, and I was like, oh my goodness, this stuff's amazing. It's hard. I can't play it. Then I started looking up John Knowles again, but John is, I think, mostly known associated with Chet Atkins, but the stories I've heard was Chet often came to you for help for arrangements and different songs.
What really happened is, well, I go to college like you guys, right? And they won't let me major in music because I'm a guitar player. So I studied physics. This is like in 1960. So it hadn't happened yet. The guitar was not cool. And I was already way ahead of a lot of their cello players and such. But the music teacher said, sorry, if you learn to play the cello or the piano, you can be a music major. So I majored in physics. And I go all the way through. So I have a PhD in physics. And for a couple of years, I worked at Texas Instruments in the research labs back when calculators were about this big and you plugged them in the wall. They looked like a 50 sci-fi movie, that kind of a calculator. And what we were trying to do is figure out how to make them smaller. And it was a really cool job, but it wasn't music. And our son was born, and Becky and I sat down and said, you know, and the rest of the world is not saying go be a musician, but I think that's what I am. And so I walked away from that and started teaching guitar lessons. And within about 5 years, I met Chet Atkins. And he was looking for somebody to write down the stuff he played. And lo and behold, I had been teaching at a community college where I took a music theory class in exchange for showing the music theory teacher how guitar players work. And that meant I'd done ear training and all that stuff. And so I could listen to Chet's records and write down what he was playing, because that's how I learned how to play, was listening to recordings. So that's what got me started. And then within about a year and a half, and of course this is like a dream come true. I mean, it's really crazy to walk away and hope you're going to be able to make it. And within a couple of years, you're, you know, working here instead of here. One of the tunes I arranged for him, The Entertainer from Scott Joplin, piano piece, you know, it was that at that time the movie The Sting was big. So he recorded it and won a Grammy for Country Instrument of the Year. So I'm thinking, I don't think I'm supposed to be in Dallas anymore. So I moved here in 1976. And so I've been here, you know, since then. And I've had a mishmash of things I've done to make it as a musician. Now, if I was to ask you guys right now what you think you're going to do, you'll probably guess maybe 15% of it. Because some of the stuff I've ended up doing, I didn't even know to wish for it, much less think it would happen. Because I started out teaching guitar lessons and then writing down guitar books. And then before long, I'm composing and doing a little recording with Chet. And then I find out who else is in town, and so I'm working with everybody here. And I've done, you know, movie stuff. I've played weddings. I've done all those things that everybody does, you know. The other thing about me is my dad and my granddad, both preachers. So I grow up hearing Protestant, you know, hymns with those 4-part things like you do when you study keyboard theory, you know, and that kind of stuff. So when I heard the keyboard theory stuff, I'm like, oh man, I know this stuff. Because I used to always go look for a tenor or an alto to sit next to in church so I could learn the parts. That was me being this kid and loving music already. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. So I've learned off of records. I've learned by hanging out. I've had accordion lessons when I was that big. And mostly I have taken every opportunity I could ever take to learn how to do something I couldn't do yet. And almost everything I've ever learned turned out to be useful. And I didn't learn it because I thought it would be useful. I learned it because I didn't know it yet, and I felt real underprepared because of not having gone to music school like you guys, or I felt like I was, you know, running all the time to catch up. So anyhow, that's my learning biography, you know. And then you and I met a couple years ago, yes.
I weaseled my way into a Chet Atkins convention mostly so I could talk to John Knowles. And he was kind enough to talk to me and my son who were there at the time.
You know,
Just a couple little things. You heard the Grammy, 2 Emmy nominations. This guy is in the Thumbpickers Hall of Fame twice,
Hall of Fame,
right?
Yeah.
Was the last time 2004? Or was that the first time?
That was, I forget.
Yeah, okay.
But what it is, they have a category for living thumb picker, and then they also have supporting musician. So I got in as a player, but I also got in because I'd written all those books. And I remember one time I was actually being interviewed by somebody and said, isn't it a little weird for somebody to be a good player and a good teacher? And I didn't think so, because that's all I'd ever known. But then I thought about it, and a lot of good teachers are pretty good players, and a lot of good players, they're not good at explaining to you what they're doing. I set out to be, and I remember that day I said this, a better teacher than most players, and a better player than most teachers. Which is to say, I'm not the world's best teacher, I'm not the world's best guitar player, but I belong in the room with the best. And that's the way I thought about it. And sure enough, I found myself over and over, in situations where I felt like I belonged because I could do what was being done there. And I think a lot of times, the fact that I could write things down was huge because a lot of guitar players, in fact, before you guys got here, how many of you guys were writing down what you played or reading music? Did you pick that up when you got here? Yeah, that's how I was doing it. My accordion music was about it, So I learned how to do that later. And the other thing that was going on, a lot of the music I had to play was not written down. So it's great that I could play things that were not written down. But when I got to study the classic guitar, everything was written down. And then it's all of a sudden comes to where if you want to learn how to play it, you've got to be able to read it. So I can read, I can play by ear, and I can hear something and tell what it is and write down what it would look like. As I've done that, I've gotten better at listening and writing down than I am at seeing music and playing it. I go this way, but not that way anymore. If you don't practice reading, sight reading, it deteriorates.
Can I ask a question right
Yeah.
now? Because I think that's a real, that touches home with me when I was a student right there, that sight singing ear training, that stuff's hard, right? Do you have any advice how to get better at that besides just doing it? Or what if you feel like people are getting it and I'm not? I must not be able to get this.
As a little kid, I always heard melodies and hummed them, so I've always had that ability to kind of tell what things sound like. You all remember when you were little, and if you're doing church and people looked at you and realized you were singing the right melody, and that made you stand out as a kid. Okay, that's me, So I've always had that, but I didn't know where to put my fingers to make those things happen. The first thing I did with my accordion teacher, this guy is the best teacher I ever had. The buttons on the accordion are arranged in keys. C is in the middle, flat keys are that way, sharp keys are up this way. So by the time I'm 6, he's making me say, if we're in the key of A flat, what's the third note of the scale? And so I was naming all those things. And then he would also make me change keys and do things like that. So I had huge background like that. When I started to play the guitar, everything I heard was not written down anywhere. So I started poking around until I could find what I heard on the records, and I was pretty good at it. And then I tried to do things that were more complicated, and that's when I realized I needed to have a real skill. So I cultivated the skill, and I'll show you how I did that. You guys are, from what I understand, you're playing the scales and the triads and things like that. Okay. I learned to do that because I knew how to do that on the accordion. I figured, well, it must be somewhere on the guitar too. Matter of fact, I remember realizing that if this was C and this was D, that must be the black note that's in between C and D over on the accordion keyboard. So immediately the whole thing became apparent to me. I couldn't find my way around, and I thought, whoa, C is on there more than once. It's that whole thing you run into that makes the guitar real flexible, but deeply confusing if you're not careful. So what I did is I would sing what I was playing, because I can already sing. So I would sing like this. You saw my voice goes right to that note, and if that's the first note of the scale, I know the second one is going to sound like this, and that's where you put your finger. here's what the fourth one sounds like, and it's here, here's the third one, it's there. Now, if I can do that, and I can go lower and play the scale up and down, the fretboard down to 7 and back up to 1. And I did it singing numbers is the way I did it, because I had those little xylophones that had the numbers. Later on, I would do it, I would say, okay, if this is E flat, what's that kind of thing. So, but mostly I still rely on numbers because it tells me where I am in the scale. And then when I got to Nashville, that's what everybody was doing. So that's a lucky stumble. You're my help. Does that make sense what I'm saying here? Could you all, if I handed everybody a guitar, could you do what I just did? Yes.
So did you start playing accordion first?
Yeah, I was like 6 when I played the accordion.
Oh, okay.
I had an uncle who played guitar, who I thought he was really cool, but I couldn't do it. I was 13. So I was 11 when I played the ukulele.
You're actually saying, if we've never done that before, there's benefits right now as we practice our scales to singing along.
Yeah. Matter of fact, I would say, if somebody was learning a few things, I think the 2 pieces of advice I would give up front would be, if you learn a new thing, sing it. If you learn a new chord, sing the notes in the chord, and this is the first note, third note, fifth note. If you don't know that, if you can just sing what they sound like, that's a big deal. Then, the next thing I would say is, if you can play this, find some other place on the guitar to play the same thing. Because everything's on there more than once. So whatever cool move you learn, sing it, and then find another way to play it, either in a different octave or in a different position on the fretboard, so that you don't get that thing where you become a really good player down here. You know, we've all seen that one, right? And you'll figure out. At first, I thought there was maybe 3 or 4 frets here and about 715 up here, but it looked like to me, with all the others, you know. And then all of a sudden, I realized there's like 3 handfuls, and you've got the whole thing. It's like, you know. I think the other thing, you guys have got various amounts of this going for yourself. I was a cocky little sucker, you know. I really thought I could do anything. And I think part of that for me came from being the preacher's kid, where everybody kind of thought you were cute, and, you know, you dressed nice today, and you were so well mannered, they'd pat you on the head. So I kind of always grew up thinking I belonged and that I could do whatever I wanted to do. And so when I take on something I can't do, I've always said, comma, yet. I've always said I can't do that yet. I've never felt like that's impossible, I can't do it, even though it may be 6 years down the way. So nothing about this, you know, terrifies me.
I'm hearing,
to say it that way?
I'm hearing the Henry Ford quote, whether you think you can or whether you think you can't, you're right.
That's right. Yeah, if you think you can't do it, it's already over. I remember the first time I heard Chet Atkins on a record, I said out loud, I said, yikes, that's impossible. And I thought, well, it couldn't be impossible because he's doing it. It must just be really tough. And really tough I could face. Impossible, not so much, you know. And so it didn't scare me. And I remember Chet was playing, and I was playing. And I was playing with Chet Atkins, as far as I was concerned. I just started picking out bass notes. And so anything I could get, any little lick I could steal, and eventually it all adds up. Oh, the other thing that happened to me, have you guys all played, done gigging in bands or backing up singers, church, whatever, you know? So I had that also. When I was 15, a Hawaiian restaurant opened up in Houston. And there was a steel guitar player that did all the Hawaiian songs, and I was the only guitar player he knew because there were many of us yet. So I got a job at 15 playing in a Hawaiian restaurant Friday and Saturday nights because I knew the 3 Hawaiian songs, and he would call out the chord changes while I learned the rest of them. And so that's where I got to learn to be unafraid of not knowing what I was doing yet, you know. And also I learned how to respect the other members of the band, you know, how to help them set up, how to show up on time, how to know whether you're supposed to wear the green shirt or the brown shirt this week. All that stuff that you do, because it's not just you, it's the people, you know, you're working with. That's kind of how I did that. So let me see if you guys know. You guys know like the CADE system, is that right? Where you like C, A up here, and that way. Okay. So you do that, and what if we did all the triads? Like, how do you do those? You do them like that. Am I doing what you do? as soon as I could do that, I thought, well, it's not enough to know C triad. I need to know the F and G, because that's going to be the 4 and 5 chord. That way it gives you a chance to play 3. So if this is a C triad, here's a G chord, that's 5. Here's the nearby 4 chord. So I did that, and then I figured out, because I had a guitar teacher tell me, if you want to stay with 3 notes, you can leave out the 5th of the scale and replace it with the 7th. So now instead of doing, you can do that. And then when I took music theory class, I realized that that is this. It's the tritone resolving to a major 3rd, right? Oh, now we're talking science fiction, right? When I started, and the thing is, I'd seen a lot of stuff, and when I took that theory class, I realized, oh man, all this stuff's got a name. And so we would write things in the theory. Did y'all take a theory class? You have to compose things to match the lesson you're studying that week, whether it's melody or tritone resolution or, right? And so you compose things to match the assignment. So I did that, except I did it on the guitar now, because, and I did it like a classical guitar player, but everybody else in the class was doing it at the keyboard, and I was the guinea pig. So now, do you guys do, let me ask you this about the triads. So if this is a C triad, that's the C, the E, the G, that's 1, 3, 5, right? And do you pull out the middle note and rate it an octave?
Open voicings.
Yeah, open
Right.
voicings, do y'all do that?
Have Bo's class, have you gotten into open voicings on your triads yet? Not yet.
All right.
I think the primary attack, this is my first semester teaching with y'all, so is triads on 3-string sets.
Yeah.
You know, we start on with 1 3-string set and we go through them all. And are you guys connecting them then vertically as well, like he was doing there?
Yeah.
So you guys have seen that. That's about where you're at. Explain more. Tell me a little more where you're at.
So like well, I don't have enough frets on here, but like going from, you know,
Yes, yeah.
you know,
Oh, I see
and
you're
then
saying-
going around the circle of fourths.
Yeah.
And
Right.
just doing all the shapes
Oh, yeah.
on those top
So
3.
Bo's real big on working progression, working the circle of fourths in what you
So
do.
you feel a harmonic motion at the same
Exactly.
time
Right,
you learn the
yep.
shapes.
Because you know, root inversion first, second, you know, back down, as high as up.
There's a jazz guitarist, no longer living, but when I was a kid, he was making records, named Johnny Smith. Go to YouTube and look for Johnny Smith. He's a total fan of circle fourths, triad motion. He used to play what he called the triad waltz, would be like. Like that, and go around the whole thing. And try and just start at a different place every day and always go, and try to play it in different places on the day, but always keep it musically coherent. So there it is. Whether you guys are doing that, but if I just did it in a broken way, didn't I? I didn't go right to patterns.
Yeah, for Bo's class, he tries to, for me at least, he tries to keep things like roped off. Like, this is the position you're playing and you have 4 frets, do everything you can in those 4 frets.
Until you really understand where you're at.
Until you
before
got
break
everything
out.
in those 4
Yeah.
frets down, and
Yeah.
then you move on, you know.
Yeah, and we teach the cage system, so every chord has its corresponding major scale pattern, right?
Yeah.
And you eventually learn your major scale across the whole guitar neck, which is from which all scales are born.
So how many of you guys are kind of at that point? Are you way ahead of the group, or are you kind of in the middle of the group?
I wouldn't say I'm way ahead.
Is everybody else do what he's doing yet? Or you see it coming and you haven't done it yet? Because that's huge. Let me show you the next thing I would do, which is when you can play like 1, 3, 5, is take 3 out and move it up and up. So that now what you have is this becomes, so instead of doing, you go ahead. It's the same chords, but now the notes are farther apart. And this is, when I heard that, I thought, oh man, that's what I heard church choir do, right? It's those open voice triads. And so that you play like this instead of playing like this on the piano. And it spreads out the voices. And on the guitar, you hear the individual notes better than you hear them when they're all grouped together. So if I hear this, if I change this note, and I can kind of move around by 6, right? Because that's what's in there, and I'm keeping that in the bass. But I can also I drive my family crazy doing that, and I don't do it like I learned it in a book. I kind of poke around to see if I can stay within. There's 2 ways to think about the guitar. One is to stay within the space you're in, the geographical thing. The other thing is to move around and stay within the musical space, which means your hand may move all over the place, right? But you'll try and move all over the place in one key or in one chord progression. So I would say you'll get that soon if you don't stay up late one night, light a candle, and keep playing until it burns low. You guys do that every night. They play so long you forget to eat.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, good.
No, seriously, honestly, raise your hands. Honestly, you forgot to eat because you're practicing so much.
It's more Netflix.
I'm hearing a common theme in the first 15 minutes here through everything you're talking about, Sean, and it's almost the one thing you can't teach, and that's called curiosity.
Yes.
Yes. Everything he's talking about, he had a curiosity to go find. And curiosity doesn't say, well, I'm not sure if that's exactly the right path or not, so I'm not going to go down that path. That's not what curiosity does. Curiosity says, I'm going to figure out what's down that path. And even though it might not be the right path, ultimately, you learn something from it.
That's right. Well, I tell you, the reason, going way back where I'm that little kid who can sing the melody correctly, I am curious. I realize that my curiosity and my love of the way music sounds are, if I have musical, we always talk about having gifts or being talented, that's my 2 gifts, is curiosity and musical passion. Not being able to play like a wizard. It was really hard for me to figure out how to wiggle my fingers to be a good player. That was a chore. But hearing music and knowing what it should sound like and saying, if I could do this, maybe I could do that, that's always been. I think it's important you know that about yourself. You've got to take a little inventory. What are my strengths? And I want to build my strengths and play to them, but I also want to make sure I'm, building up my less than strengths. I don't want to call them weaknesses. My pending strength. Right? So I remember as a classical player doing this. You guys done this? They come up to the 7th fret. Everybody would do this because this doesn't make any noise, and you can also do it on your air guitar. And that is and I'm about the 7th fret, mostly because the frets are not very far apart right there. Okay? What I'm going to do is lift my index finger and put it back down. And then I'm going to lift my middle finger and put it down. And then I'm going to lift my ring finger. And what I find out is that my ring finger won't lift nearly as far as the others. And the pinky's kind of the same way, right? These 2 are wide open. This one is barely, and that one is a little bit more. That's not a problem. That's actually how your hand ought to look. Your other fingers need to learn to behave like your ring finger behaves. So what you want to do is get to where you can do just little barely lifts. And now what you're going to do is you're going to teach your fingers to kind of move just above the playing surface, right? And now, if I'm going to do that, then I would say, okay, if I can move one finger, can I move a pair of fingers? Can I do that? Because they don't do that very easily, do they? All of a sudden, it feels like you printed some fingers and they're not yours, right? And then, exactly, there it is. It's exactly how I felt. It's the same laugh I laughed. Now, what I did ultimately, I had 2 pieces of music I would do this to. One of them, and you guys don't know that old Alfred Hitchcock show, do you? You know this piece of music. Okay, don't know that. Do you know the worms crawl in? The worms crawl. You know that one? Okay, so look at this. The worms crawl in. The worms crawl in. The worms crawl in. What I'm trying to do is keep time while I make the moves. I'm trying to teach my fingers to move with a certain elegance and precision each finger behaving the same way. Sometimes as partners, sometimes this guy hangs on and that guy ventures out. And then if in the beginning when it's sloppy, what I'll do is I don't put a piece of music on it. I'll move as slow as my breath. This almost is like a meditation. And then when I start to move this, you see what I'm doing? I'm marching across the fingerboard. You can make any number of patterns and try to make the fingers move in pairs, independently. And the thing that's funny is later on, you'll find, and what most players do is, which makes the music phrase choppy, right? So my fingers have learned to move that way. That was independent of, if you want to volume, can't you? Yeah. Up something I can't do. I've always done that. So I did that a lot, and I would do that. I tell you how much I could stand to do that. Back in the day, every cup of coffee was made by Mr. Coffee, which is slower than a lot of coffee machines. So Mr. Coffee is how long I would do that. Any more than that, I'd drive myself crazy. But I did it some every day, so that I was bringing those fingers more and more in line with what I would do. Another thing I would do is I would learn how to shift up and down the neck, and I'll show you a melody you can do that with. You can play Danny Boy. Oh, Danny. Just one string. You should play all the notes on one string and try to get them to hang together with good phrasing, which means you're throwing your arm to the next note sometimes without having to have that lurch, that sounds like something sprang.
Does that make sense, that process? That's really great exercise.
Yeah. Just pick a tune like that that has kind of an octave range, and it's not real fast, so that you can make it sound kind of vocal the way you play it. So I do that a lot. I did that. And then the other thing I would do is as much as I've played in bands and backup singers and all that stuff, the thing I've done the most is play as a soloist, more like a classic guitar player would play. And if somebody's not a classical guitar player and they look at me, they will say, oh yeah, John, he's a classical guitar player. Because they see how I sit, how my hand moves, and all this stuff. Classical guitar players say, where did he learn? Because they don't know that I've learned off of records with a thumb pick and electric guitar and all that kind of stuff. So now if I'm thinking like a classical player, and in fact, I'll tell you what I'll do. Everybody's heard this, right? Okay, I remembered that one this time of year. Basically, I'm doing open voice triads, right? And I'm trying to move this way I was moving my fingers. And what I did is I went and looked at the hymn book I still have, and I had to take out some of the notes, because if you try and do this with 4-note chords, it's a nightmare. But if you take out one, you can kind of, and there I am doing it. See the two fingers moving this pair and that pair? That's this exercise, isn't it? Oh, I'm not doing it because I can't control the phrasing of that. Bethlehem, I can sing. Nobody's gonna buy my record, but I can sing and make my music sound like singing, right? I don't care that I'm not a great singer, but I'm an accurate singer and I sing like a musician. I have phrasing, I have breath, I have musical sensibility. So a lot of times if I'm doing that, I'll be oh, I know the bass part too, don't I? Not just the melody. Again, that's from sitting next to somebody that would sing bass in church when I was a kid. It also was from doing this for a little while when I was in high school. So if I'm playing harmony and there are chords moving around, I want to know how to follow all the lines else. So, and I just do it. That's me learning this piece. It's not learning where to put my fingers. It's the whole thing. It's Christmas. It's what that song means to us because it's been sung for generations. We're going to teach little children to hear that song. We're going to, all that stuff is in me learning that piece. So that's kind of how I think about the whole enterprise. That makes sense. How many? Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. So what would you say the best strategy to combine like playing a bass part along with your like treble guitar part?
That's a really good question. And you mentioned a piece the other day that you played as a kid playing the piano. Was the Bach Minuet?
Yes.
There's a couple of pieces by Bach that all the piano players play, and one of them is this one. And the bass part is. So it has slightly different time, and that's a great man. What you do is you get the piano music, and there's too many notes. So you play the top one, and you play the bottom one. And you take it off of piano music, which is bass and treble clef, right? That's in the wrong octave. The piano would be down here somewhere. So you have to make it to where the G that's in the bass clef, it'd be the G that you write down. And whoever does this the first time can charge everybody else $15 for your work. Because everybody, oh, I want the music. Oh, well, it was I stayed up all late one night. So at least take it out to Starbucks. But I would say several people ought to try it and then compare notes. And what you're going to do is find, around here, I guarantee you can find that piano sheet music, can't you? For guitar, there's another piece that I think is originally written for a lute, is this one. And that's got two parts. Now the bottom part, this is the other thing I did. I took theory class, but I also have, I don't know, I call this cowboy theory. It's describing what you're hearing, not worrying about the technical talk. It's the same thing a farmer does when they go out and they see the clouds and they think, can't plant the crops tomorrow because it's not going to rain for 3 more days. That's not the professor of agronomy saying that, that's the farmer who's been there. So I do that same thing. So what I'm saying is the bottom part is starting with those 8 notes, the finish real steady. And then the top part is going da-da-dum, da-da-dum, da-da-dum. So that's like a rhythmic motif that's kind of throughout the whole thing. So that's cowboy theory. I'm sure there's some analytical way to say this is this and that's that. Don't tell your music theory I do that, But that's my personal theory, my personal way of making notes about what I'm up to, so I have an understanding of what I'm up to. And I would do, yes.
So what piece was that?
That one is a beret
Bach
in
Beret.
E minor
Yep.
by Johann Sebastian Bach. The other one is a minuet in G by Johann Sebastian Bach. And I'll bet if you went YouTube and said Bach Beret, it's B-O-U-R-E-E, you'd probably find somebody playing that sucker. Because all the classical players learn. Of the two things that maybe have that one feature, next thing I would do is get a song that you can play the chords to. Let me think if I can put one we got here. Let's see. Oh, okay. I've always loved this song. Take me back to the Red River Valley. Da 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 G. Da da C da 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 F da da G da 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 C. So what I would do is do this. And you'll think, not an interesting enough bass part. So you'll start moving stuff. Start moving it around to see what else you can do. That was a pretty bad example, wasn't it?
And I tell you, what you'll find out is bass lines have things they often do in much the same way melodies have things they often do. Melodies often go up and down the scale and then skip notes to make it interesting. You know, I've always thought my favorite up and down the scale melody is like Joy to the World, right? But also Chestnuts Roasting. Same trick. Change the rhythm, and Chestnuts will never be mistaken for Joy to the World. But underneath it, you'll hear the scale movement. So melodies do that stuff a lot. You know? What bass lines do is they move by fourths and fifths. They move up and down the scale, and the scale usually is the major diatonic scale, like the key you're in. But sometimes it's chromatic. I'll show you. Oh, somebody challenged me to do this one. I think I can still do it. Somebody said, "Show me a melody you can do with a chromatic scale." And so I was thinking, and somebody in one room said, "Make it a Beatles song." And I'm like, "Whoa!" So I messed around with my head, and I found this one. It starts on the third note, goes to the fifth. It goes up and down the scale. So it's on the diatonic scale. But look at this. The chromatic scale will sit right underneath that melody. And I didn't show you how to do it, but I told you you can, right? So poke around, be curious, and again, compare notes with each other. And you can do it in different octaves, and you can also do and you can put the melody on the bottom of the chromatic line up top. I got pretty close there. We got a clock constraint here. Because somebody's
We're at
still
36, is that what I read? 33. 33, so we've got about 20 minutes.
Oh, okay. Is there something, anybody else, because that was a really good question, says, you know, what happens if you do this, you become an arranger, right? Now you're not just a player. So now if you've got the string quartet, you've practiced writing bass parts, you can tell the cellist what to do, right? So you become, yes.
This is kind of going back to the circle of fourths, but why do you do circle of fourths instead of circle of fifths?
Well, I use both.
Okay.
I learned to call it the circle of fifths. And then the thing about a fifth and a fourth is it'll be upside down of each other. You know? But what harmony usually does is it progresses counterclockwise around that circle. It progresses by fourths. So I think some people will call it the circle of fourths to respect that the way that things progress. I would call it the circle of fifths. Later I started calling it either one. But yeah, that's what it is. So if I were to do, here's what the circle of fifths sounds like. Here's G. Here's C. G, D, A. That's the circle of fifths. It doesn't sound like anything, does it? Now I'm going to play it backwards. Now it sounds like the way harmony moves. So by referring to the fourths, you're talking about how songs go. I think that's the distinction. Because do you all know how to play da 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 sweet Georgia down a fourth, da 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 fourth, da 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 G Georgia around. You'll hear it do that. So fifths and fourths, it's kind of interchangeable, but I think calling it the circle of fourths kind of refers to the tendency to move by fourths on that circle.
If you go fourths, you're hearing resolutions the whole way around.
Yeah.
And going the other way, you're not quite hearing that because you're going one up to five, not the other way.
I'm running out of things to say on
Yeah,
this.
go ahead.
One of the things that Bo was teaching was like doing arpeggios, like in one, you know, like.
Yes.
But I realized that on the way down, the lead tone didn't sound as musical as on the way up.
That's really true.
Especially with minor stuff, when it's a full step away.
There's two ways of thinking about this. By learning to go up and down those arpeggios, you're acquiring the skill how to approach physically any one of those tones. And now, what's happening is as you're acquiring that physical skill, your musical sensibility is kicking in and saying, I think I'll do this more often than I'll do that. And yes, I think that's absolutely right. I'll show you guys something. Now we're going to get weird, okay? Are you ready? Seatbelts? Okay. So I was working on some duets with a guitar player. Y'all know Tommy Emmanuel? Does everybody know Tommy? Okay, so we're doing an album of duets, and we decided to play Somewhere from West Side Story. And boy, Somewhere's got the weirdest set of chords you ever saw. And we were doing it in D because I could do, there's a place for us, somewhere a place for us, take my hand, so it kind of ends on that, an A7. And then it goes back in and does that again. So we played through the thing, and we got it all worked out, and Tommy said, can we go to the key of F? And I thought, oh crap, I turned down to D, and I don't know how to play the chords, and then I thought, how are we gonna get there? So here's how we got there. When you play an A7 chord, what do you expect next? D. What happens if you didn't play the whole A7 chord? What would happen if you did this? What's that? That's the E, which is the 5 of the A7. What else is it? It's the leading tone to F. And that's what we did. We got off, we played the A7 chord, dropped all the other notes, and just stayed on E for a second to kind of erase your sense of where you are, and then we moved to the key of F. You can find it on Spotify or YouTube, whatever else, Somewhere from West Side Story. You'll hear us make that key change, and you don't hear the normal kind of chord modulating stuff. We just kind of redefine the meaning of the note E from it being the fifth note in the A chord to being the leading tone in the key of F. So we made it sound like a leading tone now. So knowing what you know, you're already moving in that direction. And that's what you're trying to do with the listener all the time, is the listener's never going to say, oh, I sure love the way you played the leading tone. They're not going to do that. But what you want them to do is be moved by the way you play the leading tone. I love when you guys went to that last verse. Then you know you're doing the work. There's a lot of stuff you'll know that the listener will never know, but if you can touch the listener, then you're in good shape. So yeah, I do that a lot. I'll tell you something else. You know those, we're going to pass out some music here for you guys to take with you. Because I took all those keyboard theory classes and I did them on the guitar, I can sit down at the guitar now and I've still got the 6-string tuned down to D. And I can play a D minor chord. Kind of things that sound like those little classical chords, right? So when I do that, every now and then I'll get an idea. And I think I was doing something pretty close to that. And that's kind of one of those sounds there. And to me, when I think classical chords like that, that's like Europe. That doesn't come from Cleveland, does it? And the only place I'd been in Europe very much was in France. And I had a friend who was a French guitar player, and he would play by keeping time with his thumb, but he would do like this. Kind of like a weird Travis Bickett thing, a French Travis Bickett thing. So I took his chords, took my chords, his little thing, and I wrote this melody. Which I can't remember. That was the first phrase. And when I looked at that melody, as you guys analyze melodies, and they have skips, and what intervals, what kind of stuff, what I saw was this melody doing, it was zigzagging up and down. So I decided to answer it with a melody that went straight up. So now here's my melody. And those two phrases are the same length. And so now what I want is something that's not that length. And now, so I've got a short one. How about another short one? Too much, okay. Now longer again. So that's my melody now, right? And being the theory guy I am, I said, that's some weird chord. What am I doing here? And I looked and played all the notes that are in those scales, and I found. So it sounds like minor, and it becomes chromatic. So it's like an extra note. It's got melodic and harmonic and all those kind of built in. So I thought, what would happen here? And this is me thinking like what bass lines do. If I played up the minor scale and played down the chromatic, and at the same time, too far, don't want to go that far. This is my D minor chord. Here's my two scales. And then I'll put my French thumb picking thing in. And I live in Nashville. I'm like around songwriters all the time, right? So I'm thinking, I'll call this tune Paris again because I'm like back in Paris. And I thought, and after a while, Paris again did not sound like this. So I changed the name of it to After Paris. Now it's a story, right? That's the way a songwriter is. So you guys have got songwriters in here too? You know what I mean? Yeah, okay, yeah. You know how important words are, right? So let me play. After Paris is one of the things I'm giving you guys the music to. You can find it on YouTube. And you'll see how I write out solos like this.
It's the second tune after the clock. This is two.
Okay. So I would think the next time I visit campus, somebody's going to be playing that, right?
Yes.
Or-
I know I'm gonna be playing it.
And I'll tell you,
Somebody else better be too.
I'll show you, after I'd played it a while, a string quartet said, we want to play that with you, but it's too short. Can you make it longer? And so what I did was I found out I could do back to the intro. So that's what I did, just go through it twice. So whatever measure number that is, instead of really playing the ending, take a detour back to the front. so, and the other thing, now that I've played it a little while, I've changed the ending a little bit. That's the ending. And now I had to just play those notes that were in the intro. I just kind of referred to them again. So it's a C sharp and a B. The C sharp in there is like a D minor chord, the major 7 thrown in, and then the B. So it's like, I don't know, a French detective show. A little atmospheric thing. And all these things, a lot of these choices, just like I chose the title, thinking like a songwriter. I'm thinking about the melody and the harmony and the way the whole thing hangs together. I'm trying to have a memory, an atmosphere, an occasion, something took place and now it's after Paris. Make sense? It's weird to think about all this stuff and go back and forth. And I tell you something, that's where I really trust my weird imagination alone. I should have said, that's the other thing I have. I love music, I'm curious, and I have a weird imagination.
You didn't hear, you haven't heard anything about rules yet, right? Like, you gotta do things this way or that way.
But you notice also at the same time, once I've done it, I go back and see, I look at what I've done as if I knew the rules, yes.
Seeing how you're so like music theory based, is that what usually like kind of sparks you to write something new, or is it more like creativity and then like the curiosity that you have is kind of like
My
rooted in
version
your music theory?
of creativity is sometimes just kind of feeling my way around in the dark, doodling, I think we call that on the guitar. And sometimes it's more structured, like music theory.
Yeah.
So I started off noodling and deciding it was something. And then I got to a certain point, and once I had that first phrase, I actually stopped and analyzed what I had so far to make sure the next thing made sense. It's kind of like if you're writing a story, this little girl walks into the woods. Well, the next sentence has got to say something about the woods, or something about the little girl, or why she was there, or something. It can't be. And the other day I went shopping and bought bread. And we do that sometimes with music without thinking about what follows and what fits. So sometimes I stop and I get analytical, but then I try things out, and once I'm happy again, oh yeah, okay, now I'm back in kind of, wow, what could happen next? I'm thinking around a little bit. So I do all those things. That's the thing about my weird brain. I think I'm as happy making stuff up as I am solving puzzles. So that's the way I think of that. So in putting After Paris together, there's a little bit of storytelling, there's a little bit of noodling, there's a little bit of puzzle solving, there's a little bit of editing, there's a little bit of change up as I get through, And I also had to teach my fingers to play it, because I couldn't play it when I first wrote it. I tried to write it to where I liked the way it sounded, not the way I could play it. And then later I taught myself to play it. If you write something you can already play, chances are you're writing something you've already written or somebody else has already written, because this is stuff you already play. So if I'm working on something new, I'm always happy to get to that point where I'm like, whoa, how am I going to play that? Good. I'll figure out a way. There's a lot of stuff I just used to know how to play. The other piece of music I gave you is
About 5 minutes till we probably need to get out of here.
yeah, I'm not going to say much about this one, except this is my thing where I said something about you don't have any idea what you're going to do in the future, and the reason is you can't predict the future. Okay, so when I was teaching at a music store back in Dallas, it was Christmas time, and we were all writing out things for our students to play. There was about 5 or 6 guitar teachers, and we started swapping arrangements. And in January, I said, why don't I write all the arrangements down, and we'll make a book, and next year we'll sell them a book. And I was taking a calligraphy class, learning how to write cool letters, so I could write out music by hand. So what you see when you look at the cloth, that's my penmanship. I taught myself to draw music because there was no music software. Because the reason there was no music software is computers weren't out there yet. Right? So this is back to the way that Bach would have done what he did. So, and there's a lot of ink and a lot of white out to get that. And I did this one about 2 years after I got the pen. And you guys know Jerry Reed, the guy that's Smokey and the Bandit, that guy. He's an amazing guitar player. If you don't know Jerry guitar, man, check it out. Man. The opening lick, I don't have to play that for a long time. You can find Jerry playing the claw on YouTube too, but it's like,
Listen up real good, guys. This is our last little taste.
that's the pickup to this. Real cool groove with his right hand. They're kind of like horn accents. He grew up listening to Ray Charles play the piano, and so he's trying to be Ray Charles. Rhythmically and harmonically. So again, what to me, when you see After Paris and you see the claw, they're so different. But it kind of gives you an idea, along with everything else you're hearing. And I keep seeing people do things I haven't seen yet out on YouTube. You know, some guy from France, and there you go. It's crazy. So whatever you think you can do, there's probably something that you can do that you haven't thought of yet. That's, if I could send you out the door with anything, it would be that.
Guys, thank you so much for coming. Let's get John a